My sister didn't just ruin my wedding, she replaced me in it. I walked into my own venue and saw her wearing a white dress, greeting my guests like she was the bride. Everyone acted like I was the outsider. She smiled at me, like she had already won. But she forgot one thing. One very important detail. The venue? It wasn't rented. It was mine. My name is Olivia Bennett, and I used to believe that the worst thing a person could lose was love. I was wrong. The worst thing you can lose is your place in your own life. Because the day I walked into my wedding, everything felt slightly off. The flowers were different. The music wasn't what I chose. Small things, easy to ignore. But then I saw the guests, looking at me like I didn't belong there. That's when the tension started to crawl under my skin. Something was wrong. Very wrong. And then I saw her, my sister, standing at the center of the room, wearing a white dress, smiling like she owned the moment, like she had taken something that was never hers. My heart didn't break right away, it froze. Because no one stopped her. No one questioned it. Not even my own mother. And in that moment, I realized this wasn't a mistake. This was planned. Carefully. Deliberately. She didn't just show up. She replaced me. That should have been the end of me. The moment I lost everything. But here's the part she didn't think through. The part no one knew. Not the guests. Not my family. Not even her. The place she was standing in wasn't just a venue. It was mine. And if you had seen my life just weeks before that moment, you would never have believed it could fall apart so perfectly. On the surface, everything was exactly how it was supposed to be. I had a stable career, a carefully built life, and a man who looked at me like I actually mattered. Daniel wasn't just someone I loved, he was proof that I had finally chosen something for myself. And the wedding? It was supposed to be the final piece. Every detail had been planned with intention. The flowers, the lighting, the music, each choice felt like reclaiming something I had been denied for years. For once, nothing was handed to my sister. Nothing was taken from me. Or at least, that's what I thought. Because even in those perfect weeks, there were small cracks I didn't want to see. Sophia asking too many questions. My mother suddenly being more involved than usual. Little comments that felt harmless at the time. I told myself it was normal. That this was what family did. They showed up. They supported you. But support doesn't feel like pressure. And it doesn't feel like someone slowly stepping into your place without asking. I ignored it. I dismissed every warning sign. Because I needed this moment to be mine. And that's the dangerous part. When you finally believe you deserve happiness, you stop questioning the people who have taken it from you before. And by the time you realize what's happening, it's already too late. And maybe that should have been my first real warning, because nothing in my family had ever stayed peaceful for long. Especially not when Sophia was involved. It always started small. A comment here. A joke there. Something easy to brush off, until it wasn't. She had this way of inserting herself into everything without asking, like boundaries simply didn't apply to her. At first, it looked like excitement. She wanted to help with the wedding. She wanted details. She wanted to be close. But closeness isn't control. And yet, somehow, she was everywhere. Calling vendors. Asking about guest lists. Suggesting changes I never approved. I told myself it was harmless. I told myself she was just being my sister. But then the tone shifted. Subtle. Quiet. Dangerous. She started saying things like, if it were my wedding, I'd do it differently. Or, are you sure this suits you? Little doubts planted like seeds. And the worst part? People listened to her. They nodded. They agreed. Even my mother started repeating Sophia's ideas like they were better. Like they made more sense. And suddenly, I wasn't leading my own wedding anymore, I was defending it. That's when the unease turned into something sharper. Because this wasn't just interference. It felt like replacement. Like I was slowly being pushed out of something that had my name on it. But I still didn't confront her. I still held back. Because part of me hoped I was overthinking. Part of me wanted to believe she wouldn't cross that line. But Sophia never saw lines. Only opportunities. And this time, she was getting closer than ever before. And the truth is, none of this started with the wedding. It started long before that, back in a house where love was never divided equally. Growing up, there was always a difference between me and Sophia, even if no one said it out loud. Or maybe they did, just not in words they thought would hurt. Because in our family, it was understood. Sophia was the one who needed more. More attention. More protection. More everything. And I was the one expected to give it. Olivia, you're the older sister. You should understand. That sentence followed me everywhere. Every argument ended with it. Every unfair decision was justified by it. If Sophia cried, I was told to apologize. If she wanted something I had, I was told to share. And if I ever hesitated, even for a second, I was the selfish one. At first, I believed it. I told myself this was what love looked like. That being the good daughter meant staying quiet, letting things go. But over time, something shifted. Because it wasn't just small things anymore. It was birthdays that revolved around her. Achievements of mine that were barely acknowledged. Moments that should have been mine, somehow becoming hers. And the most unsettling part? No one questioned it. Not my mother. Not anyone. It was like I was slowly fading into the background of my own family. And Sophia? She didn't just accept it, she expected it. Like the world had already decided she came first. And maybe that's where everything really began. Not with one big betrayal, but with years of being told, over and over again, that I was supposed to step aside. And once you've been told to step aside long enough, it stops feeling like a choice. It becomes who you are. I didn't just give things up for Sophia, I was trained to. It started with small things. Toys I loved suddenly becoming hers because she wanted them more. Clothes I picked out for myself somehow ending up in her closet. At first, I told myself it didn't matter. They were just things. But then it grew. School opportunities. I remember getting accepted into a summer program I had worked months for. I was excited, proud even. But Sophia cried because she didn't get in. And just like that, the focus shifted. My achievement became her disappointment. The solution? I stayed home. There will be other chances for you, my mother said. There weren't. And moments like that didn't just happen once, they repeated. Over and over. Each time a little bigger. Each time a little harder to ignore. Birthdays where I chose the restaurant she liked. Celebrations where I dimmed my own joy so she wouldn't feel less. And every time I sacrificed something, I was praised for being mature. For being understanding. That praise became the trap. Because it made the loss feel like something noble. Something I should be proud of. But here's the truth I didn't see back then. Every sacrifice wasn't bringing us closer. It was teaching her that my life was negotiable. That anything of mine could become hers, if she wanted it badly enough. And by the time I realized what that pattern meant, it was already too deeply ingrained to break. And that was the part one didn't fully understand back then, because while I was learning to give things up, Sophia was learning something entirely different. She wasn't just receiving more, she was being shaped by it. At first, it looked harmless. A child getting what she wanted. A younger sister being spoiled. But slowly, that turned into expectation. Then entitlement. Then something far more dangerous. Because Sophia didn't ask anymore, she assumed. If she liked something, it would become hers. If she wanted attention, she would take it. And if someone else had the spotlight, she would find a way to step into it. I watched it happen in small moments. Interrupting conversations. Turning other people's achievements into her own stories. making everything about her without hesitation. And every time she did it, no one corrected her. No one stopped her. So why would she ever think it was wrong? That's how it grows. Not overnight, but layer by layer. Reinforced by silence. Protected by excuses. Until it becomes part of who someone is. And Sophia? She didn't just become selfish. She became strategic. She learned how to smile while taking things that weren't hers. How to make it look natural, acceptable, even deserved. And the most unsettling part? She believed it. Completely. In her mind, she wasn't stealing anything. She was just claiming what should have been hers all along. And that belief, that quiet, unshakable certainty, was what made her truly dangerous. And while Sophia was learning how to take, I was learning how to disappear. Not all at once, never that obvious. It happened slowly, in quiet adjustments no one noticed but me. I started speaking less at the dinner table, holding back opinions, letting conversations pass without correcting anything. At first, it felt like peace. Like avoiding conflict was the smarter choice. But peace built on silence isn't real. It's pressure waiting to break. And the more I stepped back, the easier it became for everyone else to step over me. I told myself I was being mature, that I was choosing calm over chaos. But deep down, something didn't feel right. Because every time I stayed quiet, a part of me felt smaller. Less visible. Less real. Still, I kept going. Because speaking up had never changed anything before. It only made things worse. That was the pattern I couldn't escape. Until one day, I stopped expecting fairness entirely. I stopped believing my voice mattered in that house. And that's when the real shift happened. Not in Sophia. In me. I didn't just adapt, I disconnected. I built a version of myself that didn't need approval, didn't need recognition, didn't need anyone. Or at least, that's what I told myself. But the truth? You can only suppress so much before it turns into something else. Something quieter, colder, more controlled. And without realizing it, I wasn't just stepping back anymore. I was preparing for the day I would never step aside again. And eventually, staying became harder than leaving. Not because things got worse overnight, but because something inside me finally refused to shrink any further. The decision didn't come with a big fight. No dramatic goodbye. Just a quiet moment where I realized, if I stayed, I would disappear completely. So I left at 18. No safety net. No support. Just a suitcase and whatever savings I had managed to hide away. My mother called it impulsive. Sophia called it selfish. But for the first time, I didn't explain myself. I just walked out. And the moment that door closed behind me, something shifted. It wasn't relief, not yet. It was fear. Sharp, immediate, suffocating fear. Because now, there was no one to fall back on. Every mistake would be mine. Every failure, mine too. And they came quickly. Jobs that didn't last. Rent I could barely afford. Nights where I questioned everything. But here's what I didn't expect. Every struggle, every setback, every moment I thought I couldn't handle. I did. Slowly. Imperfectly. But I did. And with each small survival, something new replaced the fear. Control. Because for the first time, my life wasn't being decided for me. It was mine to build or destroy. And that realization? It changed everything. Because leaving didn't just take me away from them. It forced me to meet a version of myself I had never been allowed to become. And once I found her, there was no going back. And finding that version of myself didn't happen all at once. It was carved out of struggle, one brutal lesson at a time. At first, survival was simple in theory, but relentless in reality. I worked whatever I could get. Waitressing, cleaning, late-night shifts that blurred into early mornings. Sleep became optional. Stability? Non-existent. Every paycheck felt like it disappeared before I could even breathe. Rent, bills, food, always something due, always something slipping through my fingers. And the pressure, it never let up. There were nights I sat on the floor of my apartment, staring at numbers that didn't add up, wondering if I had made a mistake leaving. That was the tension. The constant question, can I actually do this alone? And sometimes, the answer felt like no. But then came the small releases. A shift covered. A tip bigger than expected. A week where I didn't fall behind. Tiny wins, but they mattered. They kept me going. Until the next hit came. A job lost without warning. An unexpected expense. A landlord who didn't care. Every time I found my footing, something knocked me back down. And that's when the real shift began. Because I stopped waiting for things to get easier. I stopped expecting help. Instead, I adapted. I learned fast. I became sharper, more aware, more strategic. And somewhere in that chaos, something changed again. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was building resilience. Quiet, unshakable resilience. The kind that doesn't break under pressure, it transforms because of it. And that resilience, it eventually led me somewhere I never expected. Because surviving teaches you how to endure, but at some point, you start looking for a way out. For me, that moment came on an ordinary day, in an ordinary place. I was working a late shift, exhausted, running on barely any sleep, when I overheard a conversation. Two men talking about property, investments, numbers that sounded unreal to me. At first, I ignored it. It felt like a world I didn't belong to, but something about it stuck. That was the hook. The idea that maybe there was more. So I started paying attention, asking quiet questions, watching, learning. It wasn't easy. I didn't have connections. I didn't have money to risk. Just curiosity and a willingness to work harder than anyone else in the room. The tension built quickly. Because the more I learned, the more I realized how much I didn't know. It was overwhelming. But instead of backing away, I leaned in. I read everything I could. Took every opportunity. Even the small ones no one else wanted. That was the release, progress, slow but real. Until the first deal came. Small. Risky. Terrifying. I almost walked away. But I didn't. And when it worked, everything shifted. Not overnight, but enough to prove something. I could do this. And once that door opened, I didn't hesitate. I pushed further. Smarter decisions. Bigger risks. More control. And then came the twist. I stopped chasing stability and started building power. Quietly. Strategically. No one in my family knew. No one saw it coming. And that was exactly how I wanted it. Because this time, what I was building was mine. Completely mine. And once I started building that power, I learned something even more valuable, how to keep it invisible. Because success, when it's quiet, becomes protection. At first, the wins were small. A better deal. A smarter investment. Money that didn't disappear the moment it came in. It felt unreal. Like I was finally stepping into a life I had only watched from a distance. But I didn't celebrate. I didn't share. That was intentional. Because the more I gained, the more I understood something dangerous. If my family knew, they would find a way to take it. So I stayed silent. That was the tension. Living two lives. One where I was still the responsible older sister, and another where I was building something far bigger than anyone expected. And the contrast grew sharper over time. At family gatherings, nothing had changed. Sophia still took the spotlight. My mother still dismissed me. They saw what they wanted to see. And I let them. That was the release, freedom without attention. But behind the scenes, everything was different. More deals. Bigger risks. Calculated moves. Until one decision changed everything. I bought a property. Not just any property, a high-end event venue. Elegant, profitable, powerful. And I did it quietly. No announcement. No explanation. Not even Daniel knew the full extent of it at first. That was the twist. Because the place that would one day become the center of everything, the place where my life would collide with my past, was already mine. Completely mine. And no one saw it coming. Not my family. Not my sister. Not even the people who thought they knew me best. Because this time, I didn't just build success. I hid it until the moment it mattered most. And just when I thought I had finally figured out how to control every part of my life, something unexpected slipped through. Not a deal. Not a risk. A person. I met Daniel on a day that didn't feel important at all. No grand setup. No perfect timing. Just a conversation that lasted longer than it should have. That was the first shift. Because I wasn't looking for anyone. I didn't trust easily. Not after everything. So when he stayed, when he kept showing up without pushing, without asking for anything, I noticed. That was the tension. Because consistency was unfamiliar. Suspicious, even. I kept waiting for the catch. The moment he would take something, expect something, reveal something. But he didn't. And that unsettled me more than anything else. Then came the release. Small, quiet moments. Coffee that turned into long talks. Silence that didn't feel heavy. For the first time, I wasn't performing. I wasn't shrinking. I wasn't calculating every word. And that alone felt dangerous. Because it meant I was letting my guard down. Slowly. Carefully. But still, down. And then came the twist. Daniel didn't see me the way my family did. He didn't see someone who should give, adjust, step aside. He saw someone solid, capable, worth choosing. And that changed everything. Because once someone shows you a version of yourself you've never been allowed to believe in, you can't unsee it. But here's where it escalated. The more I let him in, the more I realized how much I had been holding back from the world. Not just my past, but my success, my power. And for the first time, I had to ask myself something I had avoided for years. Could I trust someone with all of it? Not just the polished version. The real one. And that question didn't come with an easy answer. Because letting Daniel in didn't just mean love. It meant risk. The kind of risk I couldn't control. And that was the risk I couldn't walk away from because for the first time, it didn't feel like something to avoid. It felt like something worth testing. So I let it grow. Slowly at first. Carefully. Measured. Every conversation, every moment, I watched for signs. For cracks. For anything that would prove my instincts right, that this, too, would eventually cost me. That was the tension. Because even as things felt right, I didn't fully trust it. Daniel kept showing up. Not just when it was easy, but when it mattered. When I was tired. When I was distant. When I pulled back without explanation. He didn't chase. He didn't demand. He stayed. And that steadiness, it started to break something in me. The part that believed everything came with conditions. Then came the release. The shift I didn't expect. I started letting myself exist around him without calculating every move. I laughed without checking the room. I spoke without filtering every word. And slowly, the version of me I had buried for years started to come back. But that's when it escalated. Because the more real I became with him, the more exposed I felt. Not weak, but visible. And visibility had always come with a cost in my past. So I tested him. Subtly. Pulling away. Changing plans. Watching how he reacted. Waiting for frustration. For control. For something familiar. But it never came. And that was the twist. Daniel didn't try to manage me. He respected me. Even when I made it difficult. And that changed the dynamic completely. Because now, the question wasn't whether he would hurt me. It was whether I was ready to stop protecting myself from something that wasn't trying to break me. And that realization was more terrifying than anything I had faced alone. And that question, whether I was ready, didn't stay theoretical for long. Because Daniel didn't just wait for me to figure it out, he acted. It wasn't dramatic at first. No grand setup. Just a quiet evening, the kind we had come to share without effort. That was the build. Comfort. Familiarity. Safety. And then, without warning, he shifted the moment. His voice changed. Softer. Steadier. That was the tension. Because I felt it instantly, something was about to happen. Something I wasn't fully prepared for. He reached for my hand. Held it just a second longer than usual. And then he asked. No speech. No pressure. Just one question that carried everything. Will you marry me? Time didn't stop, but it slowed enough for every doubt to surface. Every fear. Every instinct telling me to step back. That was the escalation. Because saying yes didn't just mean love. It meant trust. It meant letting someone all the way in. And for a moment, I almost said no. But then came the release. I looked at him, and I didn't see risk. I saw choice. Real, unforced choice. For the first time in my life, no one was taking anything from me. I was being asked. And that changed everything. So I said yes. Quietly. Honestly. Without overthinking. But here's the twist. The moment should have felt like the end of something, the closing of a chapter. Instead, it felt like the beginning of something far more dangerous. Because now I had something real to lose. And that was something I had spent years learning how to live without. And having something real to lose changed the way I approached everything, including the wedding. It wasn't just an event. It was proof. Proof that I had built a life on my own terms. So when we started looking for a venue, I didn't rush. I evaluated. Compared. Calculated. That was the build. Every location we visited felt almost right, but not enough. Something always missing. Something that didn't feel like me. And then we walked into that place. The space was elegant, controlled, intentional, everything I had become. I didn't say anything at first. I just watched Daniel's reaction. He smiled. Said, "This feels like you." That was the tension. Because he was right, but not in the way he thought. I already knew this place. Every corner. Every detail. Because I owned it. Quietly. Completely. But I didn't tell him. Not yet. Instead, I let the moment play out naturally. We discussed pricing. Availability. Logistics. Like normal people planning a normal wedding. That was the release. Control without exposure. Choice without explanation. And then Sophia saw it. That was the shift. Her reaction was immediate, too immediate. Her eyes lingered longer than they should have. Her questions came faster. Sharper. "This place is expensive, right? Are you sure you can afford it?" Micro hooks. Small, but telling. I smiled. Kept my answers vague. Because I had seen that look before. Interest turning into intention. And then came the twist. She didn't just admire the venue, she fixated on it. Returned to it in conversation. Brought it up to my mother. Compared it to other weddings. Slowly inserting herself into something that had nothing to do with her. And I let it happen. Because this time, I wasn't unaware. I was watching. Calculating. Waiting. Because the place she was starting to obsess over wasn't just where my wedding would happen. It was the one thing she would never be able to take from me, no matter how far she tried to go. And once Sophia fixated on something, she never stayed on the surface. She moved in. Slowly at first. Subtly enough that no one else would question it. That was the build. She started offering help, harmless on the outside. "Do you want me to call the florist? I can check on the seating plan." Small favors. Easy to accept. Easy to ignore. But help from Sophia was never just help. That was the tension. Because every time I said yes, even to something minor, she pushed a little further. One call turned into two. One suggestion turned into a decision. And suddenly, she wasn't assisting anymore. She was inserting herself. Then came the release. The moments where it still felt manageable. She'd smile, act supportive, play the role perfectly. Anyone watching would think she was just being a good sister. And that's what made it dangerous. Because it gave her cover. It made her involvement look natural. Until it didn't. The shift was subtle, but undeniable. I started noticing changes I hadn't approved. A vendor mentioning updates I never requested. A detail slightly different from what I chose. At first, I questioned myself. Maybe I forgot. Maybe I agreed and didn't remember. But that doubt, that hesitation, was exactly what she relied on. And then the escalation hit. I overheard her on the phone. Speaking confidently. Giving instructions. Using my wedding like it was hers to manage. That was the moment everything sharpened. Because it wasn't confusion anymore. It was control. And still, I didn't confront her. That was the twist. Not because I didn't see it, but because I did. Completely. For the first time, I understood her pattern in real time. Not after the damage, but during it. And instead of reacting, I adjusted. I let her continue. I let her believe she was getting away with it. Because this time, I wasn't the one being pushed aside. I was the one watching, waiting for the exact moment when stepping in would change everything. And once I started paying attention, the small changes stopped feeling small. At first, it was easy to dismiss. A slightly different floral arrangement than what I had chosen. The seating chart adjusted for convenience. Music options swapped out for something more popular. Each detail on its own could be explained away. That was the build. Nothing obvious. Nothing dramatic. Just enough to make me pause, but not enough to react. But the tension grew quickly. Because the pattern was too consistent. Every change leaned in one direction. Not mine. Hers. Sophia's taste. Sophia's preferences. Sophia's voice, layered quietly over everything I had planned. And the worst part? Everyone else accepted it. Vendors followed instructions without question. My mother complimented the improvements. Even Daniel assumed I had changed my mind. That was the release. Plausible deniability. A perfect cover. Until it wasn't. Because the more I looked, the clearer it became. These weren't adjustments. They were replacements. My choices were being erased, piece by piece, without confrontation, without permission. And then came the escalation. I checked the confirmed orders, the contracts, the notes left behind. And there it was. Her name. Not hidden. Not subtle. Acting on my behalf. Making decisions as if she had the right. That was the moment everything locked into place. Because this wasn't about helping anymore. It wasn't even about attention. It was about ownership. She wasn't just changing my wedding, she was rewriting it. And still, I didn't stop her. That was the twist. Because reacting too early would have ruined everything. Instead, I let the changes continue. I let them pile up. I let her believe the illusion was working. Because every small change she made was building towards something much bigger. And I wanted to see exactly how far she was willing to go. And just when I thought I had seen enough, the moment came that confirmed everything. It started with a phone call. Simple. Routine. The kind I had received dozens of times before. That was the build. I almost didn't pick up. But something told me to answer. The manager's voice was polite, professional, but slightly uncertain. That was the tension. He asked me to confirm the latest changes. Changes I hadn't made. My silence stretched just a second too long. Then he clarified. Your sister, Sophia, already approved everything. That was the shift. Not a suspicion. Not a pattern. Confirmation. Clean. Undeniable. And yet, I didn't react the way he expected. That was the release. I didn't argue. Didn't correct him. I simply said, I understand. Calm. Controlled. Like none of it surprised me. But inside, everything sharpened. Because this wasn't about small adjustments anymore. This was authority. She hadn't just interfered, she had positioned herself as the decision-maker. And then came the twist. The manager continued, almost casually. She mentioned the timeline would now follow her ceremony preferences. Her ceremony. Not mine. That was the moment it locked into place. Not just control. Replacement. Complete and intentional. She wasn't helping. She wasn't assisting. She was taking over. And still, I didn't stop her. I thanked him, ended the call, and sat there in silence. Not shocked. Not confused. Certain. Because now I finally had exactly what I needed. Proof. And, more importantly, timing. And once I had the truth, the real decision wasn't what to do, it was when. That was the build. Because reacting immediately would have been easy. Confront her. Expose her. Stop everything before it went further. But easy doesn't always mean effective. That was the tension. I had to sit with it. The knowledge that my own sister was actively replacing me and choosing not to stop her. Every instinct pushed me to act. To take back control. But I didn't. Instead, I paused. I stepped back. And I thought. That was the release. Because for the first time, I wasn't reacting emotionally, I was thinking strategically. I started replaying everything. The patterns. The timing. The way she moved. And one thing became clear. Sophia didn't just want control. She wanted the moment. The spotlight. The recognition. And if I stopped her too early, she would just shift. Adapt. Try again. But if I let her continue, she would go all in. That was the twist. So I chose silence. Not weakness. Not hesitation. Control. I let every change stay. I let every decision go through. I even responded like nothing was wrong. Smiling. Agreeing. Watching. Because the further she went, the harder the fall would be. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't the one being pushed aside. I was the one allowing it on my terms, waiting for the exact moment when everything she had built would collapse in front of everyone. And once I chose silence, the truth started revealing itself faster than I expected. That was the build. Because when you stop interfering, people stop hiding. Sophia became bolder, more confident. Less careful. I started noticing conversations she thought I wasn't listening to. Late-night calls. Whispered plans. Names mentioned that had nothing to do with my wedding. That was the tension. Because the pieces didn't just suggest interference anymore, they pointed to something bigger. Something deliberate. So I leaned in. Quietly. I checked messages left open. Confirmations forwarded. Details that weren't meant for me to see. And then it happened, the moment everything aligned. That was the release. I found a message thread. Not between vendors. Between Sophia and someone else. Coordinating timelines. Guest arrivals. Even the ceremony order. But not mine. Hers. That was the twist. Because it wasn't subtle anymore. It wasn't manipulation behind the scenes. It was a full plan. Structured. Intentional. She wasn't adjusting my wedding, she was replacing it with her own. And then it escalated again. I saw the language she used. My entrance. My vows. My moment. Every word stripped me out completely. Like I had already been erased. And the most shocking part? She truly believed it. There was no hesitation. No guilt. Just certainty. Like this was always how it was supposed to be. And still, I didn't react. That was the final shift. Because now, I wasn't just watching behavior, I was seeing the full blueprint. Every move. Every step. Exactly how far she planned to go. And, for the first time, I knew exactly how I was going to stop her. And, once I understood the full plan, I started paying attention to how she was selling it. That was the build. Because a plan like that doesn't work unless people believe it. And Sophia? She was very good at making things sound reasonable. At first, it was subtle. Casual conversations with relatives. Light comments like, "We're doing something a little different." Or, "It's more of a shared celebration." That was the tension. Because the wording mattered. It blurred the lines. Made people stop questioning. Then came the shift. She became more confident. More direct. I overheard her telling guests, "It's basically our wedding too." Not a lie bold enough to shock, but just enough to reshape perception. And people accepted it. That was the release. No one pushed back. No one clarified with me. They nodded. Smiled. Moved on. And that's how it spread. Quietly. Efficiently. Until the narrative changed completely. But then came the twist. I heard her say it clearly, without hesitation, to someone new. "It's my wedding." Olivia just helped with the venue. That was it. The moment the lie stopped pretending. No shared story. No confusion. Just replacement. Clean and intentional. And what shocked me most wasn't the lie itself. It was how easily it was believed. Because by then, she had already built the foundation. Step by step. Word by word. And still, I said nothing. Because every lie she told was setting the stage. Not for her success, but for her collapse. And once the story began to spread, I watched the one reaction that mattered most, my family's. That was the build. Because if anyone should have questioned it, it should have been them. They knew me. They knew the wedding was mine. Or at least, they were supposed to. But the tension came quickly. Because instead of confusion, I saw acceptance. Subtle at first. My mother repeating Sophia's words. "It's actually a beautiful idea," sharing the moment. Sharing. The word landed wrong. But no one challenged it. Then it escalated. Relatives congratulating Sophia with just a little too much certainty. Conversations shifting around me, like I wasn't the center anymore, I was just included. That was the release. A quiet, collective adjustment. No confrontation. No questions. Just a slow, seamless shift in loyalty. And then came the twist. I heard my mother say it clearly, with full conviction, "Sophia deserves this. Olivia has always been strong, she'll understand." That was the moment everything locked into place. Not confusion. Not manipulation. Choice. They weren't being fooled. They were choosing her. Again. And what shocked me most wasn't the betrayal. It was how familiar it felt. Like nothing had really changed since childhood. Just the stakes. Just the scale. And still, I didn't react. Because this wasn't just about Sophia anymore. This was about seeing the truth without illusion. And now that I had, there was no hesitation left. Only timing. And once there was no hesitation left, the only thing that remained was the decision. That was the build. Not emotional. Not reactive. Final. Because at that point, I wasn't choosing between confronting her or walking away, I was choosing how this would end. That was the tension. Because the outcome wasn't just about me anymore. It was about timing. Precision. Impact. I had all the information. All the proof. And, more importantly, I had control. That was the release. Quiet, steady control. The kind I had spent years learning how to build. So I made a choice. I wouldn't stop her. Not yet. I wouldn't expose her early. I wouldn't give her a chance to recover. Instead, I would let everything happen exactly as she planned. That was the twist. Because the more perfect she believed it was, the more complete the collapse would be. I would let her walk into the moment thinking she had already won. Let everyone believe the story she created. Let the illusion reach its peak. And then, I would take it all back. Completely. Publicly. Irreversibly. Because this time, I wasn't the one being replaced. I was the one deciding when the truth would be seen. And when the day finally came, I didn't arrive as a bride. I arrived early. That was the build. Before the guests. Before the music. Before the illusion had fully settled into place. The venue was quiet, almost untouched, but not quite. That was the first shift. Because even in the silence, I could see it. Changes. Everywhere. Subtle, but deliberate. The floral arrangements weren't mine. The color palette slightly altered. The layout adjusted just enough to feel unfamiliar. That was the tension. Because this wasn't a mistake anymore. It was execution. Her plan fully in motion. I walked slowly through the space, taking it all in. Every detail she had rewritten. Every choice she had replaced. And for a moment, I let it settle. That was the release. Not anger. Not panic. Just clarity. Because everything was exactly where it needed to be. Exactly as I had allowed it to become. And then it escalated. Staff members moved around me, focused, efficient, none of them questioning my presence, but none of them recognizing me either. That was the moment it sharpened. In my own venue. I was invisible. Just another person in the background. Just another guest. And still, I said nothing. That was the twist. Because this wasn't where I lost control. This was where I confirmed it. Every step she had taken had led here. Every change, every lie, every assumption, now fully visible. And for the first time, I wasn't wondering what she would do next. I already knew. I was just waiting. For her to walk into the moment she believed belonged to her, and for everything to change the second I decided it would. And the longer I stayed in that space, the clearer my role became. Not as the bride. Not even as someone important. Just a guest. That was the build. Subtle at first. A staff member handing me a drink without asking my name. A coordinator walking past me, giving instructions meant for someone else. No recognition. No hesitation. Just assumption. That was the tension. Because in my own venue, on my own wedding day, I had already been replaced. Then it escalated. Guests began to arrive. Smiling. Excited. And every single one of them walked past me. Some glanced. Some didn't even notice. Conversations formed around me, not with me. That was the release. A quiet, collective agreement I had never approved. The narrative had settled. I was no longer the center, I was background. And then came the moment that sharpened everything. Someone approached me, politely, and asked, "Are you here for Sophia's wedding?" That was the twist. Not confusion. Not uncertainty. Certainty. Clean. Direct. Final. And I smiled. Not because it didn't hurt, but because it confirmed exactly how far this had gone. Every lie had worked. Every shift had landed. I had been erased so completely that even standing in front of them, I didn't exist. And still, I didn't correct them. Because this wasn't the moment to reclaim anything. Not yet. This was the moment to let the illusion reach its peak, right before it broke. And then, I finally saw her. That was the build. Not from across the room at first, but in fragments. A glimpse of white fabric. The sound of heels on polished floors. Laughter that carried just a little too far. And then she stepped fully into view. Sophia. In a wedding dress. My wedding dress. That was the tension. Sharp. Immediate. Unavoidable. Because this wasn't interpretation anymore. It wasn't assumption. It was real. She stood at the center of everything, greeting guests, smiling like she belonged there, like she had always belonged there. And no one questioned it. No one hesitated. That was the release. The illusion fully formed. Perfectly accepted. And then she saw me. That was the shift. Her expression didn't change right away, but something in her eyes did. Recognition. Followed by something colder. Confidence. Like she had already calculated this moment and decided she would win it. She walked toward me slowly, each step deliberate. And when she stopped in front of me, she smiled. Not warmly, not nervously, but knowingly. "You made it," she said, like I had been invited. Like I was just another guest in her story. That was the twist. Because she didn't explain, didn't justify. She didn't need to. In her mind, this was already hers. And then it escalated. She leaned in slightly, lowering her voice just enough. "I figured you'd understand," she added. Understand what? That she had taken everything? That she expected me to step aside again? And for a second, the old version of me almost responded. Almost shrank. Almost stayed silent. But not this time. Because this wasn't just another moment. This was the one she had built toward. And the one I had been waiting for. And that was the moment everything balanced on a single decision. That was the build. Not loud. Not chaotic. Just a quiet pause where two realities stood face to face, hers, built on illusion, and mine, built on truth. Around us, the room continued like nothing was wrong. Guests laughing. Glasses clinking. Music rising just enough to fill the space. That was the tension. Because the world had already accepted her version. Completely. And I was standing inside it, like I didn't belong. Sophia held her smile, waiting. Expecting the same outcome she had always gotten. Me stepping back. Me staying quiet. Me letting her take what she wanted. That was the pattern. And everyone in that room believed it would repeat. That was the release. The silence stretched just long enough to make it real. To make it final. And then it shifted. I took a step forward. Small. Controlled. But enough. Her smile faltered, just slightly. That was the crack. The first one. Because something in me wasn't aligning with her expectation anymore. And the room felt it. Subtle, but there. Eyes turning. Conversations slowing. Attention shifting. That was the escalation. Not loud, but building. Because for the first time, I wasn't reacting to her. I was choosing the moment. And then came the edge. The point where everything would either collapse or explode. I looked at her, really looked, and for the first time, I saw it clearly. Not confidence. Not control. But assumption. She believed this was already hers. Completely. And that belief was about to break. Because she had taken everything she thought she could. But she had missed one thing. One detail that changed all of it. And I was about to say it. And then, I said it. Not loudly at first, but clearly enough to cut through everything. That was the build. "There's something you forgot." The words landed between us, simple, but heavy. Sophia's smile tightened. Just a fraction. That was the tension. Because for the first time, she didn't already know what was coming next. The room hadn't fully noticed yet, but it was close. Conversation slowed. Eyes shifted. The moment stretched. And then I stepped past her. Not away from her. Past her. That was the release. Movement. Control. Direction. I walked straight toward the center of the room and reached for the microphone. No hesitation. No permission asked. That was the shift. Because suddenly, I wasn't background anymore. I was visible. And people felt it. The music faded. The room stilled. Every eye turned. And then came the twist. "My name is Olivia Bennett," I said, steady, deliberate. A pause. Just long enough. And I'm the owner of this venue. Silence. Complete. Immediate. Absolute. It hit like impact. Faces froze. Conversations died mid-sentence. Even the staff stopped moving. That was the shock. Real. Unavoidable. Because this was an opinion. It wasn't emotion. It was fact. And facts don't bend. I turned slightly, just enough to see her without facing her fully. Every change made here today was unauthorized. Another pause. Let it sink. Let it spread. That was the escalation. Because now the illusion wasn't cracking, it was collapsing. And for the first time since she stepped into that dress, Sophia didn't look certain. She looked caught. Completely. And once the truth was out, I didn't wait. That was the build. No hesitation. No second chances. Because moments like that don't stay open, you either act or you lose them. The room was still frozen, caught between disbelief and realization. That was the tension. Eyes moving between me and Sophia, trying to understand what had just happened and what would happen next. So I moved first. Security, I said, calm but unmistakable. Not loud, but commanding. Immediate. That was the shift. Because the moment authority entered the room, everything changed. 2 guards stepped forward without question. No confusion. No delay. They weren't responding to emotion. They were responding to ownership. That was the release. Clear. Controlled. Final. Sophia laughed at first. A sharp, disbelieving sound. Are you serious? She said, stepping forward like she could still take control back. That was the escalation. Because she still thought this was a misunderstanding. Something she could talk her way out of. But then the guards reached her. And everything stopped. That was the twist. Not dramatic. Not chaotic. Just undeniable. Reality replacing illusion in real time. The guests stepped back. Conversations dropped into silence. Even my mother didn't move. Because for the first time, no one could pretend this was still her moment. And I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I simply stood there, watching as everything she had built was taken from her just as completely as she had tried to take it from me. And that was the moment everything finally broke. That was the build. Not all at once, but visibly. Sophia's confidence didn't vanish instantly, it cracked. First in her expression. Then in her voice. This is ridiculous, she snapped, pulling back slightly, like she could still control the narrative. That was the tension. Because she was searching for anything to hold on to. Any version of the story where she was still right. But it was slipping. Fast. Her eyes moved across the room, looking for support. For validation. For someone, anyone, to step in. That was the release. And no one did. Not my mother. Not the guests. Not even the people who had believed her just minutes ago. The silence answered for them. And that's when it escalated. Her voice rose. Sharper. Desperate now. You're overreacting. It's just a misunderstanding. But even she didn't sound convinced anymore. That was the twist. Because for the first time, she heard it. The weakness in her own words. The collapse of her own certainty. And it hit her. Fully. She wasn't in control. She never had been. And as the guards moved to guide her away, her resistance didn't look powerful, it looked small. Fragile. And completely undone. And when the noise finally faded, what was left wasn't chaos. It was clarity. That was the build. The room slowly reset. Guests whispering. Staff adjusting. Reality settling back into place, piece by piece. But the tension lingered. Because everyone had seen it. Not just what she did, but what I allowed and when I chose to end it. No one spoke to me at first. No apologies. No explanations. Just silence. And for once, it didn't feel empty. It felt earned. That was the release. Because I hadn't just taken back a wedding. I had taken back control. Completely. And then came the final shift. I didn't chase anyone. Didn't call after her. Didn't look at my mother for validation. That was the twist. Because this time, I didn't need them to understand. I only needed one thing, to stop stepping aside. And I did. So yes, I still got married that day. Not in the way they expected. Not surrounded by people who chose her. But on my terms. Finally. Because sometimes, the real victory isn't exposing the betrayal. It's proving you were never someone who could be replaced. And if you've made it this far, then you already understand something most people don't. That was the build. Because stories like this aren't just about revenge, they're about recognition. The moment you finally see the truth for what it is. And maybe, somewhere in all of this, you saw yourself. That's the tension. Because not everyone gets their moment. Not everyone gets to take it back. But you can still choose what happens next. That's the release. So, I want to ask you something. Have you ever been the one who had to step aside? The one people expected to stay silent? And what would you do if you finally decided not to? That's the twist. Because your story doesn't end where there's tried to rewrite it. It starts the moment you take control again. So if this story meant something to you, don't just watch. Be part of it. Share your experience in the comments. Let it be heard. And if you want more stories like this, real, raw, and unforgettable, make sure you subscribe to Family Secrets, Best Revenge Stories. Because sometimes, the most powerful endings are just the beginning.